because a judicial race has certain restrictions on it, and you can't make promises, and you can't talk about pending cases or what you would do in a certain case, how do you communicate those underlying values? And what I'm hearing you saying is that the voters want to know who you are and what you stand for. And how are you able to communicate that without referring to particular issues that the public might want to know what your positions are on?
So, what I did often was I would talk about my background. I would talk about my parents' background as immigrants to this country. I would talk about how, based on my background, I was committed to ensuring that every single person have an equal voice in the courtroom. And I was able to draw upon my background, which was somewhat varied in the people and entities that I had represented. And that's how I was able to explain what I would be like as a judge, because you're absolutely correct. We cannot talk about certain positions that we would take. But, for example, if people would say, well, how do I know that, you're currently working for the county, the big government, how do I know that you're going to look out for the little person? I would explain the years that I spent working for a nonprofit organization representing the poor. Or I would just draw upon my background to try and explain or show that I'm somebody who really would give everyone an equal voice in the courtroom. And that's how I did it. It is a little tricky, and it can require. But the other thing I wanted to say is that a lot of people do want to hear your story, and they don't just want to hear your story, but they want to hear the story of your family, because that really does bring a commonality. It brings a feeling of what you would be like. And so for me to be able to talk about my parents and my parents coming to this country and what it was like, and the sacrifices they made, I think really part of that was informing the voter as to the type of person that I was. And it also, frankly, it's inspiring to me to talk about my family. It's inspiring for me to, and it's such a joy for me. I'm so proud of that. So I enjoyed it, and I feel like it gave the voters somebody to think about. It worked for me. I would encourage any of you out there who are thinking about running to draw upon your parents' stories, to draw upon the immigrant experience, because it brings something that is just so rich to this life that we live in. It's a huge benefit.
It's interesting that you say that, Judge Sheila, because I, on the campaign trail, I didn't have that many people asking me what my position was on different issues. I felt like they, somewhere along the lines, they had probably heard that judges can't get political, right? So they just wouldn't ask me that. So then I tell them, you know what? If I were in your position, I wouldn't know if I could trust me either. So all you have to go on is where I've been to know where I'm going to go. And my qualities come from this background, and my commitment to wanting to be on the bench comes from this struggle. And then you tie in the story, and most of them would just be, wow, you open up your soul to them in, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, whatever you've got. And I found it to be really effective. I also, this campaign found that the voters in San Francisco were super receptive to talking about the judicial campaign. They were excited about it. They were polite. And I think, hey, I don't know why, but I had a feeling that it was because of other political things going on in the country, that they were excited. They kept saying, thank you. It's like, I haven't told you what I'm running for yet. They kept saying, thank you. Thank you for running. Thank you for being a woman and running. So sometimes it became the issue, not about being Latina, but just about being a woman or being a mom or being a San Franciscan, for standing up for that. And So yeah, I didn't find, it difficult to not talk about politics, because they're like, well, you have to apply the law neutrally, but I want to know if I can trust you, because some things can go either way, or some things are difficult. Can I trust you with family issues? Can I trust you with these things? Because you have to follow the law. I think it comes down to trust, and then testing if what you're saying today was fabricated today, or do you have something to back that up that comes from your personal history, so.
Judge Flores, did you want to add on to that?
I really have nothing to add. Everything's been said already. I agree with everything that's been said. People do want to know what you've done in the past. That speaks to what your interests are, what you found important in the past, and that could be community involvement, it could be your legal work. And I think that most people, when they ask a question that is somewhat political, it could be a way that they just want to know more about you. They want to know more about you. So it calls upon the candidate to try to be skillful at that moment, to try to understand. First, you have to, state the law and say that, you can't answer that particular question, but, why do you ask that question? What are some of the things that concern you about the legal system? And you could, with one follow-up question or two, end up having them ask you something that you can answer. And that is much better received than simply saying, I can't answer anything about politics. Because if you sound, as I've seen some people do, like you're just trying to dodge all the difficult questions, then that'll also speak volumes about you, and maybe not instill the type of trust that you would like. Of course, I have to keep talking when I said I didn't have much to say. But with respect to community activities, when you become a candidate, that's not the time to become involved in your community. This is a public service role. We all have our different personalities and obligations, and we all may give back in different ways. And my comments aren't to judge anyone in that way. But the public doesn't want to know what you've done in the past, and becoming involved once you're a candidate just isn't going to cut it for smart voters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I've heard a number of you say running for judge, it's not political. The judicial election is not political, but the reality is, right, that you need endorsements, and endorsements potentially from political parties, but special interest groups even. So how did you approach the process of getting endorsements and still stay kind of above the political fray? How do you do that? Whoever can take that one first.
So I would say, Marin County is overwhelmingly Democrat. So a big get, I suppose, was the Democratic Party nomination, Marin Democrats. So that was something that obviously I sought, but there are many other organizations. I didn't notice or see really necessarily special interest groups. There were a couple union organizations. There was the Sheriff's, I think, Association was one of them, but then they had the regular unions, and the rest, I'm just trying to think here. The rest, for me at least, were endorsements from the political leaders, meaning the Board of Supervisors and cities and mayors. And for me personally, I had the good fortune of frankly, I was the attorney for the Board of Supervisors as a deputy county counsel, and in that capacity interacted with them all the time, as well as many other mayors, or they kind of knew you. And the one thing is, once you get one or two, then the others start feeling comfortable, and it kind of becomes a little bit like dominoes. And if you have people who are reputable who are endorsing you, it becomes a lot easier, I think, for other government officials or political leaders to endorse you. They get out of that little safe, that little zone, and they dip their toe into it, and they say, okay, if she's endorsing, then I'll endorse too, because I trust her judgment. And so for me, that was how the endorsement worked. The the constituents of Marin County, I think, were also really interested in knowing who the judges were endorsing. And the interesting thing is judges are not allowed to endorse except for in a judicial election. So getting other judges was a big get. And it was, frankly, it was challenging because at first there were 9 of us running. And so some of the judges on the bench were very split. And it's exhausting because you're constantly interviewing, if you will, with so many different officials to try and get their endorsements, and sending out emails and asking to meet with them and all of that. But that was probably the most important thing for me, was to get as many of those endorsements as possible. So.
Anyone else want to weigh in on this endorsement question?
Sure, I'll jump in. I also felt that most of the groups were community groups, democratic clubs centered around different neighborhoods or districts in San Francisco. San Francisco is mostly Democrat, so that was a known issue. With respect to particular interests about, let's say, different parks or the Sierra Club or different organizations that definitely have a particular interest, and their group is formed in support of that interest. Again, I felt that they're more interested in knowing if you have someone who may be on the bench hearing one of the issues that they may bring to court on behalf of their interest, who is conscientious and is going to work hard. And, they don't, of course, they probably want to make sure that you're not going to say something that's opposed to their interest. But since we can't say anything either way, for or against, that risk shouldn't be one that we should be concerned about. Doing homework, making sure that you're informed about the organization whose endorsement you're going to seek, that goes a long way. They want to know that you know who they are, that you know what they stand for, and you're to some degree showing some respect for the organization by asking for the endorsement. So there is it's not that difficult, is I guess what I would say. With respect to the comments about the different elected officials that Judge Lichtcblau just brought up, I agree. Sometimes people will be more ready to endorse if other people that they know have endorsed. That can cut both ways, though. Sometimes, and I know San Francisco can be a hotbed for political activity, separating the left from the farther left. And sometimes having the endorsement of one person will negate any potential for you getting an endorsement from someone else, unless you're able to overcome that somehow. But that happens as well.
Mm-hmm. Judge-elect Evangelista, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that, in San Francisco, at least I thought of my base, or it's not having a base, right? Like I thought, somebody actually mentioned this to me after the election, which is, Maria, you've done a good job of doing coalition building. And I said, oh, that's a nice way of thinking about it. The whole time I was thinking about how I was born and raised in San Francisco and how proud I am that I'm a product of San Francisco, and that I wanted to just go out and just be in every community group in San Francisco because I am them and they am I, right? And but not necessarily talk about, like you said, we can't be political. That's actually kind of freeing. It was freeing for me because then all we did was talk about each other. What do you do? Well, what do you do? And San Francisco is a very democratic town, but some groups won't endorse in judicial races if they feel like, well, if you can't get political, we'd rather not jump in on it, and that's fine. And some groups said, you know what, I can't get anything out of this race because you can't take a position and you can't curry favor. You have to follow the law. But you know what, I'm going to jump in anyways. You know why? Because it's the right thing to do. I had a lot of people tell me that, and that was kind of fun too. It was cool. And so I just thought of it as community. There's what Judge Flores said, different groups of community. And if you put them all together, they form this coalition. In terms of getting some endorsements and not others, can I've heard that can be an issue. But again, I was going for that coalition building. I've heard Judge Sheila say, it's threading these. What is that common thread of all of these groups together, running as a judge? And Judge Flores, I think I had heard also, was the consensus candidate, right? That a candidate that everyone wanted to be behind. And that can be difficult to do, but I think because we're not allowed to get into the political weeds of things, I think that actually makes it easier, and say, well, put that aside, and just go by my qualifications and, whether or not you think you trust me. And I think that actually works better,
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I would add is running for judge, a lot of people don't really think, like, really, I didn't even know that judges were elected. A lot of people aren't necessarily informed as to the judicial system. So it became this incredible opportunity to inform people. And I started thinking about, when there were 9 of us in the primary, and I mean, these were 9 people who were out there busting their butts. I mean, every single radio station, farmers market, parade, whatever you could mention was going on in Marin, there were 9 of us out there. And on the one hand, it was insane, but on the other hand, what an incredible opportunity to inform the constituents of our county about our judicial system. I mean, these people were asking so many fascinating questions, like how many judges? What's the process? What do you do as a judge? Are you just in one department? Why is it that in my divorce, the judge, blah, blah, blah? I mean, people have so many questions, and it can be really energizing to get out there and to inform the people in your area about this judicial system. It's a fantastic opportunity for them and for you. And so you can bring that to them, not just having to talk about or feel confined about, who do you stand for, but what is this judicial system and how does it serve the people in your community? I loved that.
That's a great place to stop, Judge Lichtcblau, because we have reached our time limit. But before we sign off, I'd love to give each of you the opportunity to share some advice, some of maybe the best advice that you received from someone as you launched into your run for a judicial office. Who would like to start?
I'll start. I'll just say, keep going. Like, when you jump in with 2 feet and keep going, and just keep going. Don't give up. Don't think about, oh, I think I can take a week off, or I can do, you got to go in just full. And there are days that you will have where you are sitting there and thinking, I can't do this anymore, but you can. There were days when I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of the farmer's market saying, I don't want to go out there anymore. I don't want to be like, hi, my name is Sheila Lichtcblau and I'm running for judge. Would you like some literature on the judicial race? It is really hard to put yourself out there, but keep doing it. Keep doing it. And we just hope to see so many more in our community out there on the bench. We need you. So please dive in.
Somebody told me to run, Maria, run. And I think that what that meant was run and don't look back. Being too preoccupied. It's important to know what your opponents are doing. But there is also a sense that you know what you're worth. You know what you need to do to win. Go do it. Don't get preoccupied with looking back, because you'll trip up. So that's my advice.
Great.
My advice would be reach out. I'm sure that I speak for all of us in saying that if you were to reach us and ask to speak at some point in time off business hours about running for election for judge, we'd be happy to talk to you. So please reach out, use your resources. We want Latinx attorneys to become judges and to serve the great state of California. It is an honor like none other, and we need more of us on the bench. with respect to the day-to-day things, yes, you need to know what it is you're getting yourself into. And I agree with both of my colleagues here that once you're in it, you just try to find a way to keep going and to not sweat the small stuff. If you're ever down about something that happens during the campaign, just take a look at the population of voters in your county and reflect upon that briefly and compare that to whatever small problem you might have had. It's not that big a deal. Take inventory of all the things that you've accomplished before you made the decision to run for judge. Okay? It wasn't easy to become an attorney. It wasn't easy to get 10 years or more of practice under your belt. It wasn't easy to do whatever you did in your practice. And this isn't easy either. But it's that same passion that got you to the position where you are today that will make you a good servant for the public. And it should be easy for you to tell people about that. Be proud.
Oh, thank you all. I'm inspired. I've got like chills here. You're all amazing, incredible role models. And it's just an honor to have spent the last hour with you all. And I'm so grateful to you all for taking this time to share what you've learned and to inspire other people who might be thinking about taking the plunge, who might be on the fence. You're wonderful, amazing, all of you. And on behalf of all of our sponsors tonight, I thank all of you who are listening out there. And this is a recorded program, so you can listen again and again, and please share with your friends. And if you know someone who's thinking about running, please share this with them and tell them they can do it. Because sometimes all you need, right, is somebody else to ask you to run.
I'd like to thank you, Anna, and Ray Manzo from San Francisco Lawyers Association as well.